Welcome to the LSU NCBRT Preparedness Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Markle. I am a curriculum development specialist here at NCBRT, and I work in collaboration with subject matter experts to create valuable and timely training for the responder community. The National Center for Biomedical Research and Training provides mobile training to both the national and international emergency response community. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're talking to Mark DuPont about some of his experiences throughout his career and how he became involved with NCBRT and some of his philosophies on being an instructor. So thank you for joining us today, Mark.
Thank you for having me.
To start us off today, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became involved with NCBRT?
Sure. The way I got involved is a little funny. I joined NCBRT in 2017 at the request or call from Jeff Main. Let me give you some background to that. I had just resigned my position with the National Association of State Boating Law Administrators. I had been there for 7 years. I had helped develop a national standard for boat operations and training, a program that was adopted by all 50 states and 6 territories. And I was just tired. I pretty much built a program that I knew was going to sustain itself without me. And I just wanted to take a break. So I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. And 24 hours later, Jeff called and says, "Hey, I heard you're looking for work." I said, "Well, no, not really. I mean, how did you find out?" And so much for doing it in the background and not having anybody know. But when I came over to Baton Rouge, we were talking about ways to develop some of the programs that NCBRT had into the maritime application, because that's my world of experience. Prior to working with NASBLA, I worked for the state of Florida as the Chief Intelligence and Domestic Security Officer, and prior to that, I was in the Coast Guard, so maritime was my space. We started working on that, but then a whole bunch of things started happening with different courses, like our active threat courses, and I ended up getting involved with that. And now I think I teach 10 or 12 different courses. I lose count sometimes, but that's how I got here.
That's awesome. It's like out of the iron and into the fire.
Yeah, exactly.
As they say.
Yeah, exactly.
So can you share kind of a defining moment from your career that's kind of shaped your perspective towards this work?
That's a loaded question. There's how much time do we have? We have about 2 hours here. Something from my career that shaped my perspective. Well, I think perspective depends on the angle that you look at something. Hence the definition of the word perspective, right?
Yeah.
And from where you stand, your unique perspective is shaped by where you've been, what you've done, what you've learned to do, things that have happened to you. I consider those things all waypoints in your life. They help shape the course that you steer. They give you guidance. Hey, this isn't working right. I'm going to turn that way and adjust my course a little bit. And for me, there was a lot of waypoints. There was a lot of things that happened in my life. I was adopted at a very young age. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your perspective, I was in an abusive home. I was put into foster care. I was bounced around to foster places. Fast forward to my adult life, I get in a motorcycle accident. I'm declared dead on the scene. I have 3 respiratory hemorrhages. I have respiratory failure and 3 brain hemorrhages. Those are all significant waypoints in my life, but each one of those gave me a unique perspective. Each one of them strengthened me in one way, shape, or form. I'll go back to the beginning. As a troubled childhood, a person that made a difference in my life that helped shape my perspective was a police officer. I will never forget this. His name was Tom Lane. He just took me under his wing. He got me involved in the Police Athletic League. I just saw in him someone that I wanted to be. There's a famous Rockwell painting. It's actually Rockwell. It's a picture of a Massachusetts state trooper They're at a diner, and next to him is like a 6 or 7 year old boy. You can see his backpack, his knapsack is on the floor. He's obviously been a runaway, and this trooper is buying him an ice cream float at the diner. That picture says it all to what that officer said to me when I was younger. Fast forward a little bit, I get into foster care, I bounce around a little bit, but I do end up in this home where the foster mother was a guiding force in my life. She is exactly what I needed in my life to kind of give me direction because I was kind of lost, didn't know where I was going. She actually contributed to me signing up for the Coast Guard. And I came home one day thinking, hey, I think I want to do this. And she said, that's a great idea for you. And, fast forward a little further, I've been married with my wife almost 30 years now. And she helped shape my life. She is someone that accepted me for who I am and what I am. And let's just finish that timeline off with, another strong thing in my life that helps give me perspective and shape me as my faith. So much so that I became a chaplain. I studied with the International Fellowship of Chaplains because I wanted to make a difference in other people's lives. So these are all significant waypoints in my life, or anchor points, you can even call them. With all that said, probably the most significant one, the one that many of us point to, is 9/11. That changed my life dramatically. At the time, I was in the Coast Guard Reserves. I owned a marketing company. I had offices in LA, DC, and Boston. And when 9/11 happened and I reported for duty in Boston, I was there for 4 days working straight. I remember walking out one day just to get a breath of fresh air. I remember there not being a single sound in the air. The planes had still been grounded. It was so quiet. But at that moment in time, I knew this is where I needed to be. This is what my purpose was, that there was no greater purpose. There was no greater mission than that one. So much so that I called my wife that day while I was standing outside and said, you know what, I don't think I'm coming back to work in the advertising business. I think we have to consider shutting that down because this is where I belong. And that was over 2 decades ago. And if you look at where I've been since then, as I said a few minutes ago, that helped me shape a national boat operations and training program that has been adopted by all 50 states and 6 territories. It helped me create a national port security accreditation program. It helped me be part of the National Domestic Preparedness Consortium through LSU and NCBRT, the Academy of Counterterrorist Education. And here I am in an organization that trains over 30,000 people a year and delivers over 600 courses a year annually. That's pretty rewarding. So that's a long-winded answer, Ashley, but there's so many things that help shape my perspective and, again, what I call waypoints in my life that are significant, that have made a difference, and that have helped shape who I am and led to me being so involved in training for the last 4 decades.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned 9/11 because my husband and I were just talking about what would be different or the same, had 9/11 not happened. And I was like, it was such a fundamental moment. Even somebody who, I was in 6th grade or something like that when it happened. And I was like, I just don't even think I can imagine how things would be different because it was such a fundamental change.
Well, and so it's interesting that you had that conversation with your husband. One of the things we talk about in the classroom with students that we train, there's an interesting realization that I had to make, many of my co-instructors have to make. Sometimes when we're talking about 9/11 in that classroom, they were not alive, or they were too young to remember the significance. Yes, they see the videos, they remember the anniversary and things like that, but it didn't have the significant impact that it made on us that were old enough to see it happen, or those of us that were in a job that was directly affected by that event. And what's really interesting, so I love history. I always love reading about history. And you look back in time and you look back at significant events. You look back, let's pick the one that jumps out probably to everybody is December and the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
Mhm.
And again, to the people that were there during that time, you look at how that whole generation was shaped, how they made decisions about what they did. My father-in-law just recently passed away, but he was a World War II veteran. He was in the Marine Corps. But you look at how he lived his life, there were things that were very significant to him about how he did things, how he saved things, the house that he lived in, the job that he took. All those things helped shape him and how he looked at things. So fast forward, you go through the Vietnam era, you go through other events that have happened in our time, and now we're talking about 9/11. So your question, what shaped your perspective? That I said it's a loaded question. There's so many things
Yeah.
that contribute to how we look at things. And when we instruct, an important part that I like to instill in other people and definitely in my children, who are all young adults now, one with 3 children of his own, we need to understand the other person's story. We may question or get frustrated with how other people look at something or the decisions that they make, but do we truly understand their perspective? Your question about perspective. My question is, do we understand their story? Where do they come from? What did they grow up learning? How did they get to this particular point? It doesn't mean you necessarily will agree with how they look at things or the decisions that they make, but at least you understand it. And I think in general, that helps us communicate better. That helps us understand each other better, and we get to where we want to go better because rather than me just arguing with you, Ashley, that you have to do it my way.
Right.
And why don't I explain it a little bit, or why don't I understand you a little bit more so that I understand why you're having a difficult time understanding this particular technique or thing that I'm trying to teach you. So I think perspective is an important word to understand as we go forth in our lives.
Yeah, so I've had the privilege of seeing you teach just this last week and just masterful teaching.
Well,
Incredible.
thank you.
So how do you bring these experiences into your approach to teaching, and kind of what sort of principles do you prioritize to effectively teach, as you've done many, many times?
Well, you pay me a big compliment. I will push back a little bit to you and say I'm only as good as the class I'm in, meaning, as you saw, as we talked about during dinners and time together, it's all about creating an opportunity for them to teach themselves, for them to create their own experience. And I'll get to that in a minute. I don't want to avoid your question, but my pathway, as I said, has always been paved with things. And I look at those things as opportunities. I look at all the things that have happened in my life, and there was opportunity after opportunity to help others. Whether I was watching someone else do it, let's go back to that police officer, let's go back to my foster mother, whether I was watching people do it or I was involved in something, whether it be law enforcement. I became a Marine patrol officer in a town called Newburyport, Massachusetts, a number of years ago. It was always about being put in a position where you have an opportunity to help someone or not. I mean, you can have an attitude that, hey, you violated something, I'm writing you a ticket, and that be the end of it. But when I look back and see how people helped me, it had an impact. And I said, you know what? I got to keep doing that. I got to keep paying that forward. So I personally don't think there's anything more important than training people that are in the public safety profession. These are professionals that are first responders. These are people that will have a direct impact on someone's life, guaranteed. Whether it's the worst day of their lives or possibly even the best day of their lives, there'll be an impact, and these people have the opportunity to make that impact. So I don't think there's any greater purpose than having that opportunity to make an impact in someone's life. And from a instructor perspective, I don't think there's any greater purpose than training the people that are going to go out there and do it, or hopefully train others to do it. Again, these are the first people that someone's going to see on a really bad event happening in their life, and it can make a big difference on how that plays out. I've also had the opportunity to impact, because of all this, tens of thousands of people all across the country through this training, and through pursuing that through the opportunity to become a chaplain with the International Fellowship of Chaplains. Again, I don't see any greater purpose than not only helping them to do their job, but you know what? They too may have a bad day, right? When they're impacting someone who's having a bad day, the trauma of that event may have an effect on them, and often does. So being able to help them through that, or just navigate through that experience, is purposeful for me as well. So as you look at the public safety world around us today, right this moment, it's increasingly challenging. There's a lot of things that have happened to make it more challenging. And add to that we have workforce dynamics that are changing dramatically too. We have people, because of the pandemic, or maybe accentuated by the pandemic, we don't have people that are willing to stay doing something that they're not happy doing. We don't have people that are making lifelong decisions, meaning, hey, I'm going to be a police officer, and they're going to stick with that for the rest of their life. They may start off by saying, I want to be a pharmacist. I may want to be a car salesman. They're trying different things because they are searching for that purpose. And our job is to make sure that when they get to us, when they want to discover what public safety or law enforcement or emergency response has to offer them, we have to remember that training is always the glue that holds that organization together. I'll submit it holds the world together. Training is that glue, and training is evolving right before our eyes, and needs to evolve to keep up with these shifting tides that we have all around us, again, with the workforce dynamics, with the increasing challenges, increasing expectations from the people that we serve. All those things are circling us. We need to make sure that we put our best foot forward when it comes to how we train them, and we have to evolve with them. So I got a lot in there again, Ashley. Sorry, you gave me one question. I probably gave you 15 answers, but I think back to the root of the question about how have those influenced my training or preparation of first responders in emergency situations. I'm thankful that I have all those experience to draw upon. I'm thankful that when I get a question in a classroom, I probably have something I can dip into to answer that question. But what I'm most thankful for is the opportunity to be able to influence these individuals' lives, because they're certainly going to influence someone else's life as they go forward and leave that classroom.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be hearing from Mark again very soon as we begin our leadership series. So make sure to tune in for that. And thank you again, Mark.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
If you have any questions or topic suggestions for future episodes, please send us an email at podcast@ncbrt.lsu.edu. Make sure you subscribe to the LSU NCBRT Preparedness Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.